are so full of gratitude to be enjoying a day with sun, a day with wind, a day with fire, a day with water. We all know that those are the elements that allow us to be here, to be alive, to be thriving today. And without respect and without care for those elements, we are going to perish. But worst of all, our next generations are facing the biggest environmental threats they've ever faced. And it is not crazy, it is not out of line for us to think of this assault, this violence, as part of the overall violence that's being inflicted upon human beings by governments. It is not crazy to think that we are facing a threat that's doing away with ancestral lands, with ancestral peoples. We are Mexican, Guatemalan, Honduran, Salvadoran. We are the people of this land, the people that we believe in our creation stories that we were sprung up from 7 caves in Chicomostok, and that we have walked upon these lands for many generations. And yet we know that there are indigenous people everywhere, in every continent. So whatever the heritage that you bring, know your culture, know your roots, because that connection is the only thing that allows us to be present and to be spiritual in this struggle. This is a struggle that requires us to be whole, to be healthy, to be okay. And that you just have to look in your background to find the love that you need to carry on. Yes, we talk about a war upon Mother Earth. And what we do every day, these dances, are always offered to the Creator, always offered to Mother Earth, always offered to nature. Because as we move and we vibrate, and if you want to take your shoes off, do it. We need to be in touch. You're on the grass, feel it. We need to be present, we need to be here now. Thank you so much for inviting us. We are the dancers from different groups, but we are now lately going out like the dancers for healing, because that's where we are. And thank you so much for inviting us. We have 2 more dances, and then we're going to let you go on with this beautiful event and this beautiful rally for Mother Earth. ¡Él es Dios!
your movement and energy. I thank everyone here for coming out tonight or today to stand with us for climate justice and racial justice. We would like to invite everybody to step forward at this time and fill in the space. Minnesota Interfaith has donated some beverages and snacks. Feel free to have some. And yeah, we're your MCs today from the Climate Justice Committee. My name is Rob Hendrickson.
And my name is Tracy Mullen. I want to welcome you all out. I know it's been a long time since we've been out, and especially Earth Day has not been marked for several years now. So it's so good that we're out here today. The Climate Justice Committee is a new group. We're only a year or so old. We are an all grassroots, volunteer-led group. And we are so happy that you're out here joining us today. One of the most important things for us is connecting to the other struggles happening in the Twin Cities. So today we're really happy to welcome our friends from TCC4J, our friends from MIRAC, and friends from other groups, because we know that climate justice doesn't happen in a vacuum. But we need to fight for Black lives in the same way that we are fighting against climate change. And we want to start today with a land acknowledgement by one of our youth. Audrey is here. Give it up for Audrey.
Hello, my relatives. I greet you with a good heart. My name is Audrey, and this is the land of the Dakota people. We agree with the Iroquois philosophy that the decisions we make should result in a sustainable world 7 generations into the future. We are organizing for climate justice to save the planet from global warming and to end environmental racism. As we gather today at the Minnesota State Capitol on Earth Day 2021, we need to acknowledge that the European Americans who came to colonize Minnesota used genocide, violence, displacement, and lies to carve this state out of the indigenous nations already here. And unfortunately, this genocidal violence continues today. 15% of Minnesota's female missing persons cases every month are American Indian women and girls. Native Americans are the most likely racial group to be killed by the police. Native American men are imprisoned at 4 times the rate of white men, and Native American women at 6 times the rate of white women. We demand justice for every last stolen sister and Two-Spirit, for murdered brothers, incarcerated sons and daughters, and we demand reparations for the institutional racism that drives our police and legal system. Environmental racism and exploitation is a continuing piece of the same genocidal violence. Line 3 is being built through Ojibwe lands in northern Minnesota, threatening our land and water. U.S. military actions around the world threaten the lands and cultures of global indigenous peoples. We demand accountability for the companies pushing profits over climate and culture. We demand the U.S. government take immediate action to stop carbon emissions so we can halt climate change, and to stop the effects of the U.S. military, both as a force of imperialism and as a massive polluter. Indigenous people live with the unjust consequences of centuries of genocide and assimilation, yet still lead the climate justice movement today. The Dakota and Ojibwe people are here, standing among us, active in their cultures and traditions, and working to steward the land and guide us in the environmental movement. The Climate Justice Committee recognizes we are a majority white organization which benefits from institutional racism and are committed to organizing for both environmental and racial justice in the U.S. We honor our Native leaders as custodians of these lands, past and present, and stand in solidarity with the fight against Line 3, the building of all pipelines, and all other state-sanctioned oppressions. We commit to working together. We pledge to continue to support the defense of water protectors, to shut down Line 3, and to fight for Native lives.
Wow, yeah, give it up for Audrey. Wow. Yeah, at this time we would like to welcome up Dana chaplain and reverend minister or public witness at the New City Church.
Nobody told me I'd have to follow Audrey. Are you kidding me? That's all we need to say. Way to go, Audrey. Thank you. My name is Reverend Deanna Newhauser. I am the Minister of Public Witness at New City Church in South Minneapolis and a frequent co-conspirator with Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and have always used the Mississippi River to orient myself. I learned the cardinal directions with the river in mind. Facing the river, I was looking west. Away from the river, I was looking east. Facing the river, north was to my right and south was to my left. Okay, friends, I got a lot harder when I moved to St. Paul because she gets real twisty up here. But just because I can't orient myself and gauge east and west directions according to the Mississippi River anymore, I still orient myself to her flow. There's a spot I like to go sit near where Minnehaha Creek joins the Mississippi in South Minneapolis. Summer, fall, winter, spring, I've gone and sat to listen and to watch. The river has stories to share, and I try to practice listening to them. Her waters carry stories of harm. I listen to her stories from up near Palisade, where extractive capitalism is poised to violate and poison her with tar sands oil, where treaties continue to be violated, where fantasies of job creation convince decision makers that this is a worthy investment rather than a death sentence for all of creation. I listen to her stories from near Brooklyn Center, where racist policing spills blood into the ground and pours chemical weapons into the air, where weapons banned in war are used against grieving residents, where mourning is met with munitions. I listen to her stories that bear witness to the climate catastrophe up and down her banks. Rising temperatures, changing ecosystems as woodlands shift north and east, heavier rains that mean increased flood risks and more nitrate runoff. Her waters carry many stories of so much harm, and her waters carry the stories of healing. I listen to her stories of persistence. Through all the seasons, she flows on. Even in the cold of winter, below the frozen surface, she keeps flowing. I listen to her stories of adaptability. Over, under, and through, she adapts to changing conditions. Sometimes making a way out of no way, wearing away new paths. I listen to her stories of interconnection. Sibling waterways connect and feed her, and their waters support life from single cells to whole cities. And I know that her stories of healing are far more powerful than the forces of harm. If we take to heart her lessons of persistence, adaptability, and interconnection, we can persist together and demand comprehensive solutions. With persistence, adaptability, and interconnection, we can breach the banks of the status quo to make a way out of no way before it is too late. With persistence, adaptability, and interconnection, we can hold policymakers accountable to protect people instead of profit. With persistence, adaptability, and interconnection, we will create a future of healing in which all life will flourish. May it be so.
Thank you so much, Dana. Our next speaker is somebody who's been out in the streets in Brooklyn Center, has been out in the streets for George Floyd, and has been out and active in the fight for Black Lives Matter with Twin Cities Coalition for Justice. Give it up for Kelly.
I'm Kelly. I'm with TCC for J, Twin Cities Coalition for Justice for Jamar Clark. People seem to think that we can talk about the environment and climate justice and saving the rivers without talking about police brutality. But we can't talk about climate justice without talking about the policing of Black, brown, and indigenous bodies. On Sunday, police killed Dante Wright. The resulting protests were met with tear gas, pepper bombs, flashbangs, less lethal projectiles, which still sent so many people to the hospital. So many broken bones and fractured skulls, and it's less lethal still isn't not lethal. And protesters were met with intimidation and kettling attempts and arrests and bogus riot charges.
That ain't right.
Say that.
These attacks, these same attacks and worse, have been used against water protectors. And water cannons were used at Standing Rock. We can't talk about climate justice without talking about police brutality. We know that police protect property. They don't protect us. In the case of Line 3, they are literally going to war with us to protect the interests of a Canadian company. The police are literally paid by Enbridge. Enbridge is literally paying them to protect property that is stolen land in the first place. They are paying police to violate the 1855 treaty territory. We can't talk about climate justice without talking about police lies. They use the same rhetoric that we're doing this to protect you. The water protectors are the real danger. The protesters are the real danger. Be mad at them. But Enbridge has people convinced that this replacement line, which isn't even a replacement line, they're building a new one and abandoning the old one. But they have people convinced that it's necessary and that without it there will be spills. That's what pipelines do. They spill. It doesn't matter. And they're still using the old line anyway. They don't actually care about anyone. But they're pitting us against each other. People and police and the people who own the property that they protect are always trying to turn the community against each other and divide us because they know that the people together are powerful. And on top of that, they've been attacking and targeting the allies that we do have. Brooklyn Center Police Department has been arresting and assaulting press, marshals, and medics, even when they're in the middle of responding to medical emergencies. A protester went down and was seizing a few nights ago, and medics and marshals rushed in to provide important life-saving aid, and they were bear-maced. The protesters were shouting at the police to stop, and they just maced them more. That ain't right!
That ain't right!
The Minnesota governor has arrested medics and marshals on the highway in November, and the cops that work for Enbridge have also been arresting medics. Medics don't have a side. They protect everybody, but they're taking action so that the people who protect us will be too scared to show up. Joke's on them, they still show up anyway. We can't talk about climate justice without talking about the fact that we're on stolen land and our Native and Indigenous folks are policed differently. Police have been interrupting prayers and destroying prayer lodges in direct violation of the American Indian Freedom of Religion Act. Yesterday, the police in Brooklyn Center tried to get a warrant to raid a church that protesters were hiding in. The warrant for raiding the church was denied. I'll say that again. The warrant for raiding the church was denied. But they've been destroying indigenous religious structures with no consequences. So how are they out here? So our government, at least, is respecting one type of religious structure while completely ignoring and invalidating another. Yeah, that ain't right.
That ain't right.
We also know that the environmental harm of things like pipelines disproportionately impacts BIPOC communities in general. Enbridge workers were arrested during a sex trafficking sting already. They insisted that it was safe and that there would be no crime. And that hasn't been the case, and things have just started. The worker camps that are created directly result in an increase in missing and murdered indigenous women. We can't talk about climate justice without talking about the lack of police accountability. The officer that murdered Dante Wright spent less time in jail than the people that have been arrested for protesting for change. That ain't right. We need an end to police brutality, an end to police murdering Black, brown, and indigenous people, an end to police literally going to war with us and using militarized tactics to harm protesters and water protectors. And on top of that, due to multi-agency agreements, police frequently bring in reinforcements like the National Guard. Right now we're dealing with Operation Safety Net and these law enforcement mutual aid operations. When we were arrested on the highway, we were on 94 by West Bank. That's Minneapolis. That's clearly Minneapolis. But some of people's citations were listed for St. Paul because the officers were from so far away that they literally didn't know where they were. That's ridiculous. And we know that during Standing Rock, Hennepin County sent deputies to join the police lines against water protectors. That's not okay. We need community control of the police to ensure that water protectors and protesters are not attacked, assaulted, tear gassed, bear maced, and arrested for no reason. TCC4J is fighting for a civilian police accountability commission. This would lead to real accountability and would give communities the power to regulate police out of existence. Because they need to be regulated out of existence, because the whole damn system is guilty as hell. Thank you.
Give it up for Kelly. Now, all the work you do, boots on the ground, community control police. Indict, convict, send those killer cops to jail. The whole damn system is guilty as hell. Convict, send those killer cops to jail. The whole damn system is guilty as hell.
That's right.
Alrighty. And next I'd like to introduce Shireen Horzuk, President of AFSCME 3800 U of M Clerical Workers Union.
Thank you. Greetings and solidarity on behalf of AFSCME 3800, the Clerical Workers Union at the University of Minnesota. We stand here today united with all of you in demanding climate justice. We stand here today in honoring the water defenders who have fought so valiantly against Line 3 and against the Dakota Access Pipeline and all of these other pipelines that are part of the extractive industries that are destroying the earth. We know, as a labor movement, as union members, that it is working class communities of Black and brown and poor white folks, communities that are on the margins, that are most impacted by the devastating policies of putting in pipelines, of putting in factories that are allowed to pollute, that have all of these issues that come up that devastate our communities. And it's easier for the corporations to think about where they're going to place their businesses in order to make more of a profit when it's putting them in marginalized communities and working class communities because all they care about are the profits. It's always about a system that places profits over people. And what we've seen just in the past year is another example, is the devastation of the pandemic. So here in Minnesota, 73% of workers were declared essential and that they had to go to work every day. You would think that the whole system had shut down, right? No. Over 73% of workers were working because they needed people there to make the profits for the corporations, right? This is the system. It doesn't matter. People's health and safety does not matter when it comes to corporate profits. The safety of the environment, the safety of this earth that we live on does not matter when it comes to corporate profits. It ain't right. That's exactly right. What we know, though, is there seems to be some confusion amongst some folks in the labor movement who have been told that it's a question of jobs or the environment, who've been told that it's a question of unions or water protectors. But what we know is it's a question of working class folks versus the capitalists that want to profit. That we know that it's a question of us versus them, but it's not about us versus each other. It's about the corporations that want to pit us against each other, and we call bullshit on them, right? And what I say as a member of the labor movement is that what we need is a massive investment in crumbling infrastructure to repair it, right? All we have to do is look at what happened in Flint, Michigan, and the water pipes that were destroyed there and leaked lead into people's homes that have devastated black and brown communities and left young children with lead poisoning that will have an impact for generations to come. So there's a real easy solution. If we need jobs on water pipes, not on oil pipes. Right? All these folks, there's plenty of jobs that could be had. The issue is there's crumbling water infrastructure in every city, in every small town. And those water pipes are the pipes that deliver water into our homes, and they need to be safe. Those are jobs that can be had, rather than the extractive oil pipelines. Right? So again, water pipes, not oil pipes, and what we really need are jobs and the environment. We need unions and water protectors. We are in this together. I've been thinking a lot about the fact that there's a labor song that says, "Which side are you on?" And as we've seen some of the debates that go on around the National Guard, around their role, it's very easy to say that the side that we are on is the side of the people. The side that we are on are those who are fighting for justice for Dante, who are fighting for justice for George, who are fighting for justice for Adam, who are fighting for justice for the water defenders, who are fighting for justice for working class folks, who are essential workers, who are other workers who've been devastated by the corporate profits. That's the side that we are all on. Yeah. We will not allow these corporate interests to divide us from any of that. We know which side we're on, and we're on a side together. I want to invite all of you to join me on May Day and join the labor movement, join the immigrant rights movement. Climate Justice Committee is going to be there. May 1st is International Workers' Day. And on May 1st, we will be marching for immigrant rights, immigration reform, labor rights, justice for essential workers, stopping police brutality, climate justice now, and stopping Line 3. So I want to invite all of you to join me. We've got flyers here. Thanks a lot.
System change, not climate change. System change,
Not climate change.
system change.
Not climate change.
That's right. Our next speaker is someone who knows very well what happens when the U.S. military goes around the globe. Barry is here from Vets for Peace, Chapter 27, to talk about the role of the U.S. military in climate disaster.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming out. I'm here speaking on behalf of Veterans for Peace. I hope that I'll give you some information that you don't have already. I know probably a lot of people have this information. Veterans for Peace, of course, stands on the side of Black Lives Matter. We're concerned about militarization of the police and police brutality. We stand with all of you. Line 3, we're committed to those issues just as much as you are.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to read my little statement here. I was told I had 2 or 3 minutes, so I left a lot of information out. My name is Barry Reach, member of Veterans for Peace since 1991. I've also been aware of climate change in the Minnesota that I love since 1992. I've been watching our climate change since 1992. If anybody thinks it hasn't changed, you're not paying attention. I'm also aware that I'm part of the problem. We're not gonna solve this problem by blaming it on others. We all bear responsibility. I drive a car, I consume resources. That's all part of climate change. Part of Veterans for Peace mission statement is to increase awareness of the cost of war. Thus, we feel that the U.S. militarism is a large contributor to the climate crisis, and part of our job is to educate others on those costs, which are substantial. We feel that as former military, it is our job to spread this message, which until recently, just like the conversation on ending war, has been lacking, especially with environmental groups. The elephant in the living room, so to speak. Even Bill McKibben himself discounts the impact of militarism, and you don't hear Greta Thunberg mention it either. As a result, we have now created, and Veterans for Peace has been talking for years about climate change. These signs are old. But just recently, we created a National Veterans for Peace Climate and Crisis and Militarism Working Group, and I'm part of that group. And I'm certainly glad for all those gathered today to broach this subject of U.S. militarism and its contribution to the climate. And I'm grateful for those of you who may be hearing these things for the first time. Okay, if you're not already convinced of the impact that U.S. militarism is having on our lives and the climate crisis, I offer just a few examples. Some will probably be repetitive from other speakers. First of all, as you're aware, the National Guard is deployed right now here locally with hundreds of gas-guzzling military vehicles. These things are not fuel-efficient vehicles. We're talking like 3-4 miles a gallon. And there's hundreds of them. And that's just a small part of it. You can't see it now. I just want to call your eyes to the clouds, not the cumulus clouds, but the other ones. 2 hours ago, our sky was covered with those clouds. Those aren't natural. Those are human-made. 100 planes, 4,000 missions a year worldwide, geoengineering, trying to control our environment. We're not going to solve climate crisis by burning more fuel. I guarantee you that right now. So pay attention to the sky. The U.S. military has the largest carbon footprint of any organization in the world. The U.S. pressured the 1997 Kyoto Protocol not include military missions for any country and then pulled out. Other U.S. military missions include depleted uranium, Agent Orange, chemical and biological weapons, burn pits, chemical spraying, etc. Emissions from the 800 U.S. foreign bases are counted as being from the host country. For years, the Pentagon has been turning the USA into an armed lifeboat to repel climate refugees. Militarism is the coercive arm of the extractive economy. The U.S. military produces about 59 metric tons of CO2 annually, which each equals the emissions of Sweden, Denmark, or Portugal. A B-52 Stratocruiser consumes about as much fuel per hour as the average car used in 7 years. Military contaminated sites within the U.S. total an area equal to the size of Florida. Military spending is one of the least effective sources of job creation. We could actually take that money and put it into jobs that help enhance life rather than destroy life. There's plenty of opportunity for better use of that. For those who don't know, our working group wrote and delivered a letter to John Kerry, appointed a special presidential envoy for climate. That letter, endorsed by many individuals and organizations, was delivered, read, and a meeting was held with Kerry's staff, which took place just this last Friday, which included our executive director, our board chair, and 3 members of our working group. We don't expect miracles but we feel we have helped Homer form a good working relationship with Kerry and his staff. The letter can be viewed at veteransforpeace.org or Veterans for Peace Chapter 27. There's also an accompanying petition which you can sign on to, and we know, even as John Kerry states, that the climate crisis will not be solved by the government. We know too that it will not be solved without addressing U.S. militarism. If you indulge me, I just want to read just a paragraph from that letter. We are pleased that the Biden-Harris administration has created this position as a reflection of the seriousness of the climate crisis. And we are pleased that the person with this position is you. It is approaching 50 years since you, as an anti-war veteran, delivered to Congress a lengthy, articulated, and devastating critique of the Vietnam War. Many of you probably weren't around at that time. Some of us were already anti-war veterans or soldiers, and you spoke truth to power for us. You have had many positions of power since that time. In your present position, we ask that you summon the courage and clarity about war and militarism you expect to Congress in 1971. You posed the question, how do we ask a man to be the last man to die for a mistake, as in the Vietnam War? Now the question we pose is, how do we ask millions of people to die as a result of a climate catastrophe fueled by endless war and militarism? Thank you for your time and attention. I would encourage you to join us if anybody wants to join our working group. Just check out veteransforpeace.org.
Thank you, Barry. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. The people united will never be defeated. Next up, I'd like to welcome Gabriel from Native Lives Matter.
Good afternoon. Let's go, guys. My name is Gabriel Black Elk. I'm one of the lead organizers of Native Lives Matter. So today, as we come together to acknowledge Earth Day, and as an indigenous person, our people understand the importance, the love, the strength of what we call Uchiwaka, Grandmother Earth. For years and years, our people have been saying to respect Mother Earth. Until this day, we are still screaming it. From the destruction of the Black Hills for gold into these nasty ass pipelines we call the Black Snake. Black Snake Killer!
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 And fuck line 3.
Fuck Line 3! Yeah!
Until the grass grows and the river flows, Miniwi Choni, water is life. And rest in power to Jacob Wood, a native who was murdered by police in Maine during a mental health crisis 2 days ago. And to LaDonna Bravo Allard for showing us our path at Standing Rock. We salute you, Miniwi Choni. And justice for Dante Wright and justice for Paul Castaway. Thank you for allowing me to be here. Native Lives Matter.
Native lives, they matter here.
Native lives, they matter here!
Native lives, they matter here.
Native lives, they matter here!
Black lives, they matter here.
Black lives, they matter here!
Black lives, they matter here.
Black lives, they matter here!
Trans lives, they matter here.
Trans lives, they matter here!
Trans lives, they matter here.
Trans lives, they matter here!
Our next speaker today is an organizer with U of M, Students for a Democratic Society. They've been doing work on climate change, they've been doing work on education rights, and they've been doing work for Black Lives Matter. Give it up for Eric.
Thank you everybody for showing up. I'd just like to start by thanking Climate Justice Committee for providing U of M students with the Democratic Society with the opportunity to speak today. I'll try and keep it short. Every day, we are seeing the youth of this city, this state, this country, and this entire planet rise up and fight for the future that we wish to inhabit. Whether it be standing up against police terror and violence in our communities, or demanding an end to pipeline construction and for the essential change to renewable energy in order to mitigate future climate catastrophe, students and young people are on the front lines. We will not stand idly by as our peers' lives are stolen by killer cops or our planet is ruined by the endless pursuit of profits by a handful of capitalists. Now, here's the deal. Some people will look at the passion and drive of young people and dismiss it. They'll say, once you're out of school, you'll settle down. Some of them might even say, when I was your age, I used to think I could change the world as well. Now, I only got one thing to say to these pessimists and quitters out there, and that is, and pardon my language, fuck that. We're in this for life. We are a revolutionary generation. The struggles we mobilize for will not magically disappear. The only way things will change is if we make them. So please, make the connections you need to make in order to keep the fight going. The number one thing you can do is join one of the organizations that is leading the charge, like Climate Justice Committee, like SDS, like TCC4J, like NIRAC, like all the other organizations in this city that are fighting for the right causes. Our fight is inherently asymmetrical. Our opponents have far more funding and have the full support of the violent state apparatus. So if they've got money and pigs, we need people power. It is the only way. Lastly, I'd like to plug an event SDS, along with the Black Student Union, is putting on in a few hours. Tonight at 4:30, we are rallying down at the University of Minnesota Police Department office in Stadium Village. We are going to march for justice for Dante Wright, along with the ongoing demand for community control of UMPD. Everyone is welcome, and we want to get as many boots on the ground as possible. So please, keep the night going and show up. For more details, you can check out our Instagram page and our Facebook. I'm gonna end with one of our favorite chants in SDS. So, when I say dare to struggle, you're gonna say dare to win. Ready? Dare to struggle!
Dare to win!
Dare to struggle!
Dare to win!
Dare to struggle!
Dare to win!
Thank you.
Thank you so much, you men. All right, next up, I would like to welcome up Tom from Extinction Rebellion. Before I start, I just want to say thank you, Climate Justice Committee, for having me. Thank you for putting this on. It's an honor to be here with all of you, with all the other speakers, and for the dancers who led off the event today. So when I joined Extinction Rebellion, I joined because I heard the scientific community say over and over and over that our current path has us hurtling towards the collapse of civilization and the biosphere that sustains all of us. I'm here because I could not stand idly by and still look at myself in the mirror every morning. So I became an activist out of a feeling of desperation, of despair, of maddening futility at the insanity of a society speeding towards the abyss of climate breakdown. We have to stop this, I would tell myself over and over. And then I became obsessed with the question of how we could continue to be the author and finisher of our own demise. The more I asked the question, the more I was led to the conclusion that climate breakdown is being allowed to happen because our society does not value the people who will bear its terrible burden. Our society does not value the Black people, the Latinx people, the indigenous people, or the citizens of the global South. Our society does not value the poor or the downtrodden. The suffering and death of the many remains an acceptable price to pay for the power, profit, and privilege of the very few. The foundation of climate change is the injustice that has plagued the United States since this land was taken by force from its indigenous caretakers for the purpose of white settlement. Pipelines like Line 3 are built across sovereign indigenous land because tar sands profits are more important than indigenous rights.
Air pollution kills thousands of people in the United States because it falls on redlined communities of black people and other people of color. Transformative policies are dead on arrival because oligarchs have hoarded the world's wealth and the power that comes with it. We are consigning entire island nations to the waves of the Pacific Ocean because the people and societies on those islands are expendable in the face of corporate profit. It is past time for climate reparations for all of these communities to right the ongoing wrongs that capital continues to perpetrate on them. The call for a just transition means that if we don't build a world that values justice and equity, genocide, ecocide, and mass suffering, all the costs of climate breakdown will continue to remain acceptable to our society. I'd like to close today with a brief story. Two friends of mine and I were up in northern Minnesota in early March, participating in an action against Line 3, and everything had gone wrong. We were disrupted by heavy police presence, and the action had not gone according to plan. When it was over, my friends and I came into a camp where everyone was in a circle, reflecting on what happened. At the end, one of the indigenous people spoke. I don't remember his exact words, but they went something like this. This struggle is not just about one day. You are all participating in a fight that has been going on for 500 years. So understand the legacy that you're participating in. Feel the joy in fighting for what is right, because there is joy in this struggle. I get overwhelmed frequently by anger, futility, and despair. But going to that dark place will drag you down into complacency and hopelessness. So today I'll close by asking all of you to feel the joy of the struggle, because that joy will see you through. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Oh, sorry, I lost my place. What do we want? Climate justice. When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Climate justice!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Climate justice!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Climate justice!
When do we want it?
Now!
That's right. We're going to do just a couple more speakers, and we're going to do a short march to the armory, which is just that way. We'll introduce it. One of our lead tactical people will introduce our march in a few minutes. Our next speaker is Brad from the Minnesota Immigrant Rights Action Committee, talking about climate refugees and the connection between immigrant rights and climate change.
Hey everyone, as Tracy said, my name is Brad. I'm a member of MIRAC, the Minnesota Immigrant Rights Action Committee. We're a grassroots organization of immigrants and their families, friends, and coworkers fighting for immigrant rights and social justice in the face of decades of immigrant bashing, deportations, and racism. What does immigrant rights have to do with climate justice? Why do people from Central and South America come here? Why do people from Africa and Asia come here? Are they coming here pursuing the wonders of the American dream? No. Many of them are fleeing the nightmares that the U.S. government and military created in their homelands. Fleeing the wars in Central America in the 1980s. Fleeing gang violence that started in Los Angeles here in the USA and was deported into their countries. Fleeing unjust trade agreements that wiped out agriculture in Mexico and other countries. And increasingly, fleeing climate catastrophe that's also largely made right here in the USA. Have you heard of Berta Cáceres? Oh, yeah. She was a Honduran activist fighting for the environment in her country. And what happened to her? She was assassinated by the US-backed government, a government that was put in place by a coup backed by the US that led to a series of migrant caravans fleeing the horror show there. Some of those migrants ended up right here in Minnesota even. Do you remember Hurricane Maria that walloped Puerto Rico just a few short years ago? And I don't know the exact numbers, but I think around 10% of the population of Puerto Rico fled as a result of that hurricane. many of them ending up in the U.S. Mainland, including right here in Minnesota. These kinds of environmental catastrophes are increasing because of the need of capitalism to constantly extract and constantly expand. And that will provoke more and more forced migration. MIRAC believes that no human being is illegal, especially on stolen land.
That's right.
We believe that our siblings from Central, South America, and Mexico, and around the world should be welcomed here with open arms. We stand for legalization and full equality for all. And we ask you to stand with us in that fight as we stand together to end the system that has brought us climate catastrophe. We invite you to join with us in our End the War on Immigrants campaign as we work to end the injustices faced by immigrants, mass deportations, kids in cages, and they're still in the cages down there, the border wall, and militarization of the border, and the list goes on. So as Shireen mentioned earlier, we're working together with the labor movement and the immigrants' rights movement and all social justice movements to have a massive march on May 1st, on May Day, International Workers' Day in Minneapolis. Will you join us in that march? May Day's on a Saturday this year, so Saturday, May 1st, 2 o'clock p.m., Lake and Nicollet in Minneapolis. Where will you be on May 1st?
Lake and Nicollet!
At what time?
2 p.m.
All right. We look forward to standing together with you as we fight climate change and climate catastrophe and fight for the rights of immigrants, of migrants who are forced to flee those catastrophes and come here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dirag. Water, not oil. Keep it in the soil. 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 Thank you. Alrighty. So I'd like to welcome our lead tactical. This is Wyatt, and he will just talk about where we're going to march.
Hey folks, so we got one more speaker we're going to do here, and then we're going to do a very short march to another important government institution in this complex. You've heard it from a lot of people. The U.S. military is the #1 polluter in the world. Climate justice is necessarily connected to racial justice. We're seeing that every day. This last week up in Brooklyn Center, where the DNR's conservation officers are part of the massive militarized police deployment that's attacking people demonstrating their First Amendment rights. So we're going to take this demonstration, a short march, over to the National Guard Armory, which is right down the street here. So after Catherine, the next speaker, speaks, if people could line up on this sort of sidewalk here, we'll have a banner in the front. Stay tight, stay behind the marshals and the banner, and we will march into the street and take a short march down there for the final speakers. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Wyatt. You can tell he's one of our marshals by their orange vests, so they're very easily visible. But I want to give it up for Catherine, our last speaker here. She is a member of the Climate Justice Committee and is a rock star. So give it up for Catherine.
Thank you. What do we want? Climate justice. When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Climate justice!
When do we want it?
Now!
Hi, my name is Catherine, and I'm with the Climate Justice Committee. On this Earth Day 2021, we're demanding climate policies that work for the people, not just for those in power. We've all known for a really long time that the United States has the worst record on pollution, on treating resources and people as disposable, and contributing to our mounting climate crisis. What is less known and acknowledged is that the U.S. military, the very institution sworn to protect Americans, is doing the exact opposite with its lack of climate justice accountability. The U.S. military is the single largest institutional emitter of greenhouse gases in the world. In short, it's the world's largest polluter. Currently, the military isn't held to any of the provisions of the Paris Climate Accord or any other emission standards. That is bullshit. We're not going to combat global climate change if we can't get this mega polluter to drastically cut its emissions.
Yeah.
The United States has a really long history of trying to influence other countries, but we have no moral authority on climate issues. Both Republican and Democratic administrations have refused to sign major climate treaties. Yes, President Biden does have a plan to get U.S. emissions to net zero by 2050. But the thing is, Joe Biden's not going to be alive, much less in power, by 2050. So I'm not really impressed by a goal with a deadline 29 years from now. We need to treat climate justice and climate change with the urgency it requires, instead of expecting future generations just to figure it out. We need to use the U.S. military's gargantuan budget to invest in harnessing wind and solar energy, using electric vehicles, building greener buildings, and ending our nation's addiction to fossil fuels, which already dictates so much of our foreign policy. In the private sector, we need big companies to take responsibility for the environmental damage they cause, instead of presenting sustainability as solely an individual choice in buying just whatever product they've created that seems the greenest that week. We can't keep falling for the bait and switch trick of the exchange of a few short-term jobs for the destruction of already stolen land.
That's right.
We need to recognize that there can be no climate justice without racial justice.
Amen.
Governor Walz and other politicians have completely ignored the demands of Native nations to stop Line 3. Across the country, landfills and other environmental hazards are disproportionately located in communities of color. Climate refugees are turned away by all kinds of administrations by the most polluting country of the world. Enough is enough. It is time for the people to lead, and it is time for real change. And so I urge you, stay engaged with these issues outside of when Earth Day reminds us of them. Use your voice to make sure people in power know that you're demanding climate justice now. Now, not 29 years from now in 2050, not just around their next election or shareholder meeting, but now.
Now.
If you'd like to be part of the Climate Justice Committee, our wonderful grassroots group of climate activists in the Twin Cities, please visit climatejusticemn.com for more information on our next new members meeting. And now, to get us excited, amped up to start our march, I'd like to invite everyone to join me in singing everyone's favorite Earth Day song. I know you know the words. Happy Earth Day to you. Happy Earth Day to you. Happy Earth Day, dear Earth. Happy Earth Day to you. Thank you.
We're going to line up behind the Leave banner here and march to the Armory. So if everybody could get ready to do this. It's a very short march just down the street.
Hi, Henry.
Let's get started with the 10.
Well, how are you?
When the water we drink is under attack, what do we do?
Stand up, fight back.
When the water we drink is under attack, what do we do?
Stand up, fight back.
When the water we drink is under attack, what do we do? When the water we drink is under attack, what do we do?
It's so good to be out amongst people. I know, it's such a difference.
Under attack, what do we do?
I'm getting such my
When the water we drink is under attack, what do we do?
I prepared it for just a couple of minutes.
When the air we breathe is under attack, what do we do? When the air we breathe is under attack, what do we do?
I want to read it.
When the air we breathe is under attack, what do we do? What do we do?
That was just watch it.
That's right.
Okay, well, I just want to stick it back there then, so it doesn't blow away.
But you did a good job, and you could email it to me, and I could publish it. Mary? You got it typed up? Okay, send it to me. And you sent me, I haven't posted it yet. You said it was posted.
Well, the petition is cool.
Few people here today.
You gonna leave your flag? Yeah.
When the people on the planet are under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. When the people on the planet are under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. When the people on the planet are under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. When the people on the planet are under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. When the water we drink is under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. When the water we drink is under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. When the air we breathe is under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. When the air we breathe is under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. When the people on the planet are under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. When the people on the planet are under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. When the water we drink is under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. When the water we drink is under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. When the air we breathe is under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. When the air we breathe is under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. When the water we drink is under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. When the air we breathe is under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. When the people on the planet are under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. When the people on the planet are under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. When the water we drink is under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. When the water we drink is under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. When the air we breathe is under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. Stand up, fight back. Hey, 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 hey. These pipelines have got to go. Hey, hey. Hey, hey. These pipelines have got to go.
The other side.
Ho, ho. These pipelines have got to go. Hey, hey. Ho, ho. These pipelines have got to go. Hey, hey. Ho, ho. These pipelines have got to go. Hey, hey. Ho, ho. These pipelines have got to go. Hey, hey. Ho, ho. These pipelines have got to go. Hey, hey. Ho, ho. These pipelines have got to go. Hey, hey. Ho, ho. These pipelines have got to go. Hey, hey. Ho, ho. These pipelines
matter here.
Black lives, they matter here.
Black lives, they matter here.
Black lives, they matter here.
Trans 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 lives, they matter here.
Immigrants are welcome here.
Immigrants are welcome here.
Immigrants are welcome here.
Immigrants are welcome here.
Native lives, they matter 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 here.
Black 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 lives, they matter here.
Muslim lives, they matter here.
Lives, they matter here.
Muslim lives, they matter here.
Lives, they matter here.
Black 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 lives, they matter here.
Hello everyone. We are live right now in St. Paul, Minnesota. A coalition of groups here is demanding action on climate change. We started just up the hill at the Minnesota State Capitol and took a short walk over here to the National Guard Armory.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone.
Check.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zach Fisher, and I'm a member of UMN Students for Climate Justice. I recently graduated from the University of Minnesota, but I plan on returning for 3 more years to attend law school. I've grown more active in the community over the years I've attended, and climate justice has become especially important to me due to its universal impact, and especially on those. Louder. Due to its universal. Okay. Climate justice has become more important to me due to its universal impact on everyone, and especially those who experience the most state violence. The University of Minnesota proclaims to uphold progressive ideals such as caring about the climate, and especially recently with the murder of Dante Wright and George Floyd, they have put out statements claiming that they are here for the community and yearning for the loss of them, and yet at the same time sending UMPD officers to Brooklyn Center to participate in the militarized terrorization of protesters. It ain't right. The university's two-faced approach to social justice issues is put on full display when it comes to their climate policies. While on the surface level they encourage students to lower their climate footprint and claim to have clean energy goals in the future, they are still investing in fossil fuel companies. Currently, the University of Minnesota publicly has at least $70 million invested in companies that invest in fossil fuels and contribute to the climate crisis. This is only of the investments that we know of publicly. The University of Minnesota also has private endowments that are not required by state or university law to be disclosed in any capacity to students. Thus, for all we know, the
university could be financing directly or indirectly the Line 3 pipeline up north that harms indigenous sovereignty. Any amount of investment into fossil fuels is putting greed and the prioritization of short-term profits of those companies over students and the planet at large. As organizers for Students for Climate Justice, we have held multiple referendums over the course of multiple years regarding the university and whether or not they should disclose and divest from fossil fuels. Both of these referendums were upheld with 85% student support at least, yet the university has still yet to act on any of the referendums at all. The University of Minnesota is not accountable to its students in any capacity. Every avenue students are given to make change lead directly back to the Board of Regents, a group of 12 unaccountable individuals who lobby themselves to the state legislature, meaning they are entirely unaccountable to students and their priorities and values. On top of that, any other procedural avenues students are provided, such as MSA, which serves as our student government, or Senate committees, which are made up of faculty and students that pledge to be able to make policy decisions and changes on behalf of the students. These two lead back to the Board of Regents, meaning that any decision that students would like to see changed on the university is recommendatory at best. Not to mention, even when students are able to pass things with high levels of support, the university often ends up just using bureaucratic methods to wait out student organizers by just allowing the students to graduate and the movements to fizzle out based on that. And then they just completely drop the causes off their agenda. It ain't right. Because of this, we as students have begun organizing a mass movement with many different groups that are fighting for different causes, such as the abolishment and divestment of UMPD, the divestment from fossil fuels, and the complete cutoff of the contract with Aramark, which still uses prison labor that the UFM is still affiliated with. Because of this, the university knows that we cannot do this alone, and which is why we have gone together to try to use our universal power as students and as people to fight back against the capital interests and those who wish to harm us at the hands of the profits of the few. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Liam from the Student Movement Activists of South High. Give it up for Liam.
Hello everyone. As I was just introduced, my name is Liam Stahl. I'm with the Student Movements Activists of South High, or SMASH for short. We're here today to demand that the powers that be shift their focus from their own continued existence and prosperity and toward repairing our planet's climate. In both sectors, private and public, large corporations and the United States government, and entities like the military, which blur the line between the two. Now I'm going to issue a warning. All of my talking points have pretty much been covered by now, so expect to hear some repetition. I'm sure everybody here has heard all sorts of projections about how long it will be until the damage we're doing to our climate becomes irreparable. It's probably been too long by now to expect that we can fully heal the damage we've done in a timeline that any of us will live to experience, which makes this fight all the more desperate. We're looking now to not avoid a consequence, but to limit how extensive it is. Climate justice is not a new issue. Rachel Carson published Silent Spring in 1962, and all sorts of pollution, to some degree, has been a problem since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. I want to go on record stating that was one of the biggest mistakes we ever made as a society. It's never been a more crucial issue, though, than it is today. We're rapidly accelerating into a world that will no longer be able to support life, and it's in our best interest to avoid that outcome. There are many people, most of them in positions of power, who would like to pretend that the responsibility for this crisis lands squarely on the shoulders of the individual, and that by switching to metal straws and sorting our recycling, we can all collectively avert an apocalypse. It's a nice thought, but it doesn't really have a basis in reality. This is ultimately an issue for the systems that we populate and the authorities in charge of running them. Now, I want to run a bit of an allegory here. We've all seen a similar situation to this one unfold on a much faster scale over the last year or so. I'm referring to the pandemic, of course. And those of us who noticed that the government and large corporations were very quick and efficient at dismissing the pandemic as a non-issue might be, well, not at all surprised to learn that they've had practice with the climate crisis. The same tactics have been used over the years to, shut down any radical mindset that might evolve among our populace. It's a non-issue, It
ain't right.
It ain't right. We are in a better position than ever to realize that individual actions even performed collectively, have limited power in the face of such a large-scale threat. But there are several other important lessons that we can take from the pandemic. These systems ultimately derive their power from the people that inhabit them. As such, we hold some measure of control over them. We don't need to assume that there are some immutable aspects of our current situation. That's another lesson. Because, as we've seen with the pandemic, our society is subject to change at any moment. And something else that we've learned that I'd like to think is somewhat heartening is that we can withstand punishment from outside sources for longer than many of us previously thought possible. We're strong. So while this may be a tiring, repetitive uphill battle that we're fighting for many generations into the future, take heart in the fact that we brought about more change in the past year than most of us ever thought we'd see in our lifetimes. You all see the fence over there up at the Capitol building? Anyone else notice the helicopters circling around up there? That's a sign that the authorities are becoming scared of us. I've been to a couple of climate justice protests in the past, and there was no fence, there were no helicopters. This is new. This is progress. I ran out of speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Liam. Next, I'd like to introduce DJ from TCC for Jay.
So here's my thing, right? So Tim Balls keeps coming out and he says, oh, I used to be a teacher. I care about the youth, right? The youth are out here trying to get justice. The youth are out here trying to grieve. The youth are out here trying to heal. And what is happening is he has the National Guard attacking them. He has the National Guard brutalizing them. Would a fucking teacher do that? No. He doesn't care about the youth. He's a fucking fascist.
That's right.
So, they keep claiming that they're protecting us. They keep showing up saying that they're the peace officers. This is my favorite joke, right? They're like, we're the peace officers. Y'all are crazy. They were on the, I saw them on the press conference last night. They're like, they had water bottles. They had shields. They had umbrellas. I was like, first of all, two of those things are to defend yourselves. One of those things doesn't matter when you have fucking riot gear on.
That's right.
Okay? Tear gas is against the Geneva Convention. When they go and they invade and they overthrow fucking governments, they can't even fucking use it against them. It's against international law. But we're out here trying to get justice for our community. We're out here begging people not to fucking kill us because the color of our skin. Now all of a sudden they can break international law?
That ain't right.
That ain't right.
Fuck that.
That ain't right. That ain't right. That ain't right. And they're out there specifically targeting black and brown bodies. And they're shooting these rubber bullets at us because they're trying to actually hurt us. I had a reporter the other day. Someone's like, fuck 12! Fuck 12! Fuck 12! Fuck 12! Fuck 12! I had a reporter the other day that was really confused. He was national press. He said, how can they shoot my camera lens when the rubber bullets are supposed to be shot at the feet? I know they got the fancy word rubber bullets, but it's not supposed to hit skin. They keep shooting people in their hands, and they're bleeding. They keep shooting people in their head, and they're bleeding, and their necks. These bullets can still be lethal.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's what people need to understand. They're trying to kill us, and they're specifically targeting black and brown bodies out there. That's what we need to talk about, because they're still using us as target practice. And you can tell, they don't treat us with dignity. They don't treat us with respect. They don't see us as human. They're out there using bear mace on us because they don't see us as human. That ain't right. 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 And so here's my other thing, right? Tim Walz did a post on Twitter the other day, and he said, "Why everyone keeps telling the National Guard to go home? This is their home. No, their home is 5 fucking hours up north, and tell them to get their ass back to their own community." Now when I say National Guard, you say go home. National Guard. 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 Go home. So what we need to do is that we need to stop this military occupation. That's happening all over the world, right? Because the military goes around and they overthrow governments, let their countries become war-torn, and then they come in and say that they're going to be the fucking heroes. That's fucking bullshit. 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 And that's what they're doing right now. They're out here killing black and brown and indigenous bodies, and now they're going to have a military occupation downtown. And they're going to tell us it's for our safety because they're saving us. Bullshit! 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 You can't save us from ourselves. We know what we're doing. This is our community. Don't tell us to our own community. This is what community looks like.
This is what community looks like.
Show me what community looks like.
This is what community looks like.
This is what community looks like.
This is what community looks like.
And the last thing I want to say is all these tactics that we're seeing them use in Brooklyn Center, it's the same tactics that they're using up north against the water protectors, if not even worse. And the thing is, we got the national spotlight because George Floyd got lynched. Right? So everyone's looking to this town during this trial, but no one's covering all the fucked up shit that's going on at the pipeline. And so know that this is out here happening, and it's happening even worse to our indigenous brothers and sisters. That's right. And we need to stand together in solidarity. Because we know they word ain't shit. We've seen what they've done to our indigenous brothers and sisters. We know a treaty and their word doesn't mean shit.
That's right.
So we gotta defend ourselves. We gotta focus on grassroots organizing. We need to focus on making sure that we're talking to our neighbors, that we're building our community, and that we're going to survive and get through this together. And the last thing I want to end this with is Black Trans Lives Matter and all power to the people.
The people united will never be defeated. The people united will never be defeated.
The people
United will never be defeated.
The people
United will never be
defeated.
Thank you, DJ, always a great speaker. I'd like to introduce Misty here from the Anti-War Committee.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here and coming out and for staying. And can you hear me? Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So my name is Missy Rowan, and I'm with the Anti-War Committee. We've been working for 20 years out in the streets protesting U.S. wars and occupations at home and abroad. We do this for many reasons. We oppose the atrocity of war. We oppose the use of our tax dollars to fund the illegal occupation of Palestine or to perpetuate the drug war in Colombia. We oppose the militarization of our borders and the incarceration of refugees who have an internationally recognized right to safe passage. We oppose the militarization of the police and the racist policies that are built into our justice system. And we oppose the tax on civil liberties, on our right to free speech, on our right to disagree with what our government is doing, and our right to stand up to state violence and systemic racism when it takes over our cities. Now, we as a committee have been doing this for long enough to know that it is important to make those connections, to be cross-pollinating our movements, because that work is essential. We appreciate the opportunity to speak here today with so many groups who are pushing for radical change and a livable future. So why are anti-war activists concerned about climate change? I can tell you that the war machine is one of the largest contributors to greenhouse gases on the planet, rivaling the outputs of some countries. Or I can tell you that war wreaks havoc on ecosystems, killing not only humans, but plants, animals, and everything else as well. I could mention the depleted uranium that is leaking into the soil and causing birth defects in Iraq, or the consequences of the U.S. storing, testing, and using nuclear bombs more than any other country, in fact, more than every other country combined. All of these things are true. But there's an even more obvious reason why these movements are connected. The point is that these wars that our government is endlessly engaged in are about stealing resources.
That's right.
It is always the same line leading up to war. The people of fill-in-the-blank country need us to bring them freedom and democracy, right? You know this one. The politicians and the corporate press machine start in about their humanitarian crisis that needs our direct and violent intervention. Never mind that the U.S. has its own track record of human rights abuses right here at home. The conflict is always packaged as do as I say, not as I do. It is always seen as a threat to U.S. safety, and our soldiers are portrayed as heroes, freeing them from their oppressors. But the truth is that these countries have something that our government wants and isn't willing to pay for. The tanks roll in, the markets open up to U.S. interests, and the locals pay with their lives. It's not always about oil, but it usually is. In the case of Bolivia, it's about lithium. In Afghanistan, they're guarding opium mine fields. Our government treats all of South America like its own backyard, and it always has. And you know what? It isn't getting better with Biden in charge. It is getting steadily worse.
That's right.
Joe Biden isn't just breaking promises, he is hinting at what is to come, which is more wars and more occupation. His budget proposal wants more military spending than Trump, not less. And everything that he has done has constituted a ramping up of the war machine. Biden's vision for America is to come out on top of the coming resource wars, and to do so by force. Kamala Harris actually admitted it recently. She said for years and generations, wars have been fought for oil, and very soon they will be fought for water. It is rare for the empire to show its face like that, but when someone tells you who they really are, believe them.
That's right.
They have seen the writing on the wall, and instead of taking action for climate change and moving to drastically change the course of our wasteful and destructive ways, they are doubling down on this system. Everybody said that if we vote for Biden, we could push him left. We'll get pushing, because we don't have any time to waste. Climate change is not a hypothetical, it is here, and it is happening. Droughts, fires, rising sea levels, and other effects of climate change will cause and continue to cause mass migrations of displaced people. These people are climate refugees, and instead of helping them, they are treated like criminals. Until we see climate change as a social justice issue, it will continue to get worse. The fact is that the world's richest top 10% cause 50% of the emissions, but the world's poorest are the ones that have to pay. The fact that the U.S. has taken whatever it wants without regard for people who suffer is the legacy of this nation. It is up to us, the people, to address and to change that. So to be clear, war is an environmental issue. War is a racial justice issue. War is an economic issue. And these things are very much related. That is why we need to build a movement as large and as strong as possible to address this crisis. We need to be holding the right people and institutions accountable for climate justice and for climate destruction. We need to demand from our so-called representatives that they act. It should be illegal to destroy the planet. It should be illegal to steal the resources of another country. And if we're going to get into it, all of the wealth of this nation was built on stolen land by forced unpaid labor, and it is time to address that legacy. And it is also time to let the youth lead. I am sick of hearing what 70-year-old men think about proposed solutions that they won't even be around to see play out. We are stealing our children's future to prop up a system that is doomed to fail because it is currently failing. So we are not asking, we are demanding action. We demand an end to the war. We demand justice for all. When the people on the planet are under attack, what do we do?
Stand up, fight back!
What do we do?
Stand up, strike back!
All right!
We'll line up and march back behind the banners again.
So you guys go out in front.
We'll get chanting. System change, not climate change.
System change,
not
climate change.
System change.
Climate change.
System change.
Thanks everyone for tuning in today. I'm gonna end this stream now. I gotta pack up and get to another event in a little bit. This was a coalition of different organizations that met up the hill there at the Minnesota State Capitol here in St. Paul, Minnesota, demanding action on climate change. We marched over here, short march to the National Guard Armory for a few more speakers out front, and now the group is marching back to the state capitol. So thank you for everybody that tuned in and that shared this live stream. Hope the weather where you are is as nice as it is here today. Have a good day.